I was going to talk about something else today, but then this came out, as you get to see, 9 hours ago on GB News. Sargon of Akkad has apologized. Why is this monumental? Because the entire British press, the entire apparatus was so focused on him being a cheeky little shit back in 2016. So what actually happened is, because I lived through those times, I lived through that dark period, Sargon wasn't interested in politics at the time. He was just starting a YouTube channel. He was becoming somewhat famous, and I think he had around 70,000 subscribers or so. And the thing that he was talking about was the creeping internet censorship. And my God, if I'm thinking about those times, the internet was so dramatically different, to the point that if you were to have it today, most journalists would freak out. Like, they would have a meltdown. Imagine how they reacted over Elon Musk buying Twitter. Like, Elon Musk's Twitter is absolutely nothing compared to the old internet. Like, in the old internet, you could literally say whatever you wanted. Like, absolutely whatever you wanted. And you now notice the birth of censorship. Which most people on the internet found unthinkable at the time, simply because free speech actually was something that mattered and people believed in, not as a law that's written in the American Constitution, but as a principle of the free world. Like, that's what separated the West from Nazi Germany, from the Soviet Union, from other dictatorships, was the ability to actually allow people to speak their mind, no matter how offensive it is. If someone finds you offensive, you will get blocked or muted. And that's pretty much how the internet worked. Like, if you said dumb shit, other people would block and mute you, and eventually you realize that you have to change yourself if you want to interact with people. But you notice, like, this huge power creep of censorship going around. And at the time, Jess Phillips was leading the charge. She was part of this group called Reclaim Our Internet, to help women feel safe on the internet. And that's when the first trust and safety councils were started. That's when the concept of hate speech laws began. I mean, later on we will see people being arrested for posting a rap limerick on social media. We're going to see people getting arrested for writing Islam is questionable on their house. Like, all of this can be traced back to the primordial point where politicians and activists decided that we need trust and safety councils in order to censor the internet. And activists like Sargon of Akkad were against it. Now, again, they weren't really political. They just cared about video games. Like, they just wanted to play video games and trash talk on the internet, and they didn't like what the activists were doing. But the problem is, like, they had very small channels. They had a couple of thousands of subscribers, and they couldn't compete with politicians that had immense platforms or the mainstream media. And the way you can do that is by dragging attention to yourself, by saying something that's incredibly offensive to the point where people have to acknowledge you. It's a tried and true tactic on the internet, and the left does it all the time, except that the media doesn't report on it. So when Sargon of Akkad responds to a tweet from Jess Phillips, which was like, oh, she's very concerned about the internet because of threats and blah, 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 and this is why we need more censorship, this is why we need people to be policed in everything they say. And so the activists that were pushing for censorship, both politicians, people from the media, academics, and activists, were latching on to anything that they could find on the internet offensive. Like, if they found a metaphor, if they found a figure of speech, if they found even some trash talk or banter, they would take it and they would say, oh, look, this is absolutely like gospel. This is what the person wants to do. This is why we need trust and safety. So an example of this would be later on with Bannon, who got banned from YouTube for saying the expression, oh, if Trump gets back into office, heads will roll, which is obviously a metaphor, right? Like, it's a figure of speech. It doesn't actually mean that he's going to become Vlad the Impaler. But the activists and the moderators would take that as gospel. Like, they would say, oh no, this is inciting violence, right? So this is what, at the time, when Sargon said the thing, this is how the culture was like. If you said something like even remotely offensive, activists would take it and frame it, and this is why we need to censor the internet. And in order to prove that this is the case, he basically said that, oh, Jess, don't worry about it, I wouldn't even. Right? I can't repeat what he said because YouTube has AI and algorithms, but I'm pretty sure everyone knows, like, it was in the media. You guys know what he said. But he said it in order to prove it that she's going to pick it up and run with it, which is exactly what she did, right? She's like, oh, this is why we need censorship. Look at what content creators are doing. But the interesting part is that at the time, it didn't cause that much of a stir. It was just like, from his point of view, it was like, okay, well, they don't really have actual vile stuff to complain about. So, like, even if I say something that's bad, but not, like, incredibly vile, they're still going to use it and run with it. Now, as I mentioned, at the time, nothing happened. He didn't got banned from Twitter. He didn't had his YouTube channel suspended. Like nothing happened. And I think, like, even in an interview with Jess Phillips, she basically comes out and says something in the lines of, well, I didn't get really that upset. Like, I'm on the internet. I heard worse. The internet is a vile place. Blah, 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 blah. But all of that changes when he actually runs for politics. Like, you gotta understand, British politics are not about the policy that you have. Like, if you're the best economist in the land and you can actually prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can improve people's standard of living, you can lower crime, you can make people happy, it doesn't matter. Like, the only thing that matters is, have you said something offensive in the past? And if you said something offensive in the past and you're not Labour, then the media will go after you. So all of a sudden, the offense necromancers, the offense archaeologists, they dug up the tweet from back in the day. And by the way, like, this is a problem with British politics, right? Because absolutely no person on earth hasn't said something offensive at some point in time. So because everyone has done offensive things, but in order to run for politics, you need to be clean. This is why their politicians lie their ass off. Like, this is why all the politicians have to pretend that they are squeaky clean and lie about their past transgressions. Because, again, nobody, absolutely nobody goes through life, especially after, like, 25 or 30 years, without being offensive at least once. And basically, like, this stuck to Sargon. It's the rape tweet, they called it, right? Like, they wouldn't even show it on the screen. They wouldn't even talk about it. They would just call it like that. And that label was enough to shut him down. And, he did got assaulted within the campaign. I mean, he got fish thrown in his face. He got milkshake. This is something that was done to politicians at the time from the right wing. And you could notice, like, the discourse of British politics was changing, because in my country, no one gets milkshaked, like, no one gets assaulted. And you can say what you want about whether you think this is appropriate or not, but you need to take into account that it is very advantageous for the establishment. It's very advantageous for the people that are already in power, because they have taxpayer money and can afford a security detail. So if you have, like, a politician that's established and they just go on a podium and there's a fence that prevents people from going next to them, and they have, like, their security detail, like, no one is going to milkshake them. But if you're just, like, some random politician that's trying to form a base, that's trying to do grassroots movements, and you get milkshaked, well, all of a sudden you look ridiculous, you can't actually stay at the event, you have to go and clean up, right? So it's a tactic done to destabilize politicians that are trying to appeal to grassroots movements. But anyway, the interesting thing is that this hounded Sargon up until recently. I think, like, this may be why his YouTube channel got demonetized, and why people from the Conservative Party were pressured by reporters. Like, why did Liz Truss actually go to his publication and did an interview? Like, don't they know the horrible joke that he uttered years ago? So now Sargon is going on Great British News, and he's apologizing for the joke. This is, like, again, 6 years later, 7 years later, like, I don't fucking know. But the media does, right? And his apology was very interesting, I gotta say. He said that when he said the joke, it was just words. But he believes that ever since, British politics have changed dramatically. And it has gone away from words into something worse. And he gave the example of Jess Phillips' acceptance speech, where after barely managing to win against her opponent that ran on an Islamic platform, she was getting heckled by some of her opponent's supporters that were a little bit more agitated than she would like. And Sargon is pointing to that and is saying that it should be time to rethink the way that people do politics, and it should be time to realize that there are actual issues that are happening now which are more serious. He frames it in an interesting way. But basically, this is what he is doing, right? Like, he is saying politics have changed since then, and I can't afford to be a cheeky little shit on the internet. Like, I've now been a father many times, and I have to take this more seriously because there's other pressing matters and more serious concerns. So this is his apology. I personally, like, don't think that the media will accept it. But I do think people on the right, at least, are now probably going to be more open on doing debates with him, right? Because when the media will pressure them, it's like, well, why did Liz Truss went to this place? He can say, well, yeah, but like, he apologized, you know, he did something bad on the internet years ago, and now he's sorry for it. Notice how, like, the left isn't held to the same standard. Like, you have here in the comment section that Jess Phillips never apologized for laughing at male suicide. Like, again, that was the culture then. Like, the culture then was third wave feminism. And you had, like, trending hashtag yes old man and all the other vile stuff. Like, it was pretty much open season to say anything negative and pejorative towards men. And you could get away with it. Like, there would be no backlash, no nothing, because men have privilege and women don't. So it's viewed like punching up. But yeah, like, I don't remember the exact context, but I do think like something like that happened, that I know a lot of feminists actually did. They were laughing at male suicide, which the rate is actually higher than women. And yeah, like the media doesn't hold that into account, right? So like, you can be a cheeky little shit online if you're part of labor. Like, if you're a left-leaning person, that's fine. But if you're not, then it's going to be held against your head. So it's interesting to see. Most of the comments are saying that what Sargon did is right, while some other people are disagreeing. I genuinely think that he may regret doing that. Like, if he could take time back and undo the past, like, he would probably not have said that to Jess Phillips. But what can you do, right? Like, there is no forgiveness in woke ideology. There is no such thing as redemption, yet he did it anyway. So let me know what you guys think, though, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.